The city never truly slept, but for Elias Grand, the world had long gone quiet. The only sound that kept him company was the soft hum of his mop gliding across the marble floor of Kincaid Tower, a place that gleamed with luxury he'd never touch. Every night, he pushed his cart through empty corridors while most of the world dreamt, and he tried to forget that dreams had stopped visiting him years ago. In his pocket, his old phone buzzed, a message from Mia, his 7-year-old daughter. "Dad, I can breathe better tonight." He smiled faintly, eyes glistening. The doctors called her condition manageable, but for Elias, every shallow breath she took was a prayer answered. He worked through pain, exhaustion, and loneliness because the light in her eyes was the only sunrise he had left. Once he had a family, laughter echoing through a kitchen too small for their joy. But cancer stole Chloe, his wife, and left behind a silence he couldn't mop away. Her favorite flower, a daisy, was still painted on Mia's hospital notebook, a symbol of hope, fragile yet stubborn. Every time Elias saw it, he felt her voice whisper, "Be kind, even when the world forgets you." Above him, the tower's top floors still glowed, where power whispered in boardrooms and fortunes changed hands. Elias often wondered if the people up there ever looked down. Did they see the man polishing their floors at midnight? Did they know he existed? That he was a father fighting every day not to collapse under the weight of his own quiet battles. Sometimes, as he leaned against his mop and gazed at his reflection in the glass walls, he barely recognized the man staring back. The world saw a janitor, invisible, ordinary. But inside, he carried the love of a man who'd already lost everything once and refused to lose again. He didn't need recognition. He only needed one more tomorrow with his daughter breathing beside him. And yet, fate was quietly drawing lines he couldn't see, connecting his weary footsteps to a woman he'd never met. Somewhere, just a few floors above him, Harper Kincaid, the billionaire CEO who owned everything, was dying alone. And before the week was over, their lives would collide in a way that would rewrite both their hearts forever. In a private hospital suite overlooking the sleepless city, Harper Kincaid lay surrounded by silence money couldn't fill. The room smelled of antiseptic and wilted roses from her assistant, the kind gesture of someone paid to care. Her machines beeped in rhythm with a heart that had forgotten what it meant to live for something real. Outside the glass, neon lights shimmered, celebrating a world she no longer felt part of. She had built empires, conquered markets, and been named the Iron Visionary. But when her kidneys failed, not one of her partners, friends, or ex-lovers showed up. Power had made her untouchable and unbearably alone. Even the doctors avoided her eyes, whispering that her rare blood type made finding a donor nearly impossible. Harper listened without reacting. She'd built walls too high to cry over now. Late one night, she asked the nurse, "If I die, will anyone even notice?" The nurse smiled politely, pretending not to hear. When the door closed, Harper stared at her reflection, pale, hollow, fragile. For the first time, she saw not a CEO, but a woman who had traded connection for control, love for loyalty, and ended up with neither. The weight of her own empire pressed down on her chest, heavier than any illness. Across the hall, in the same hospital, Elias Grand sat beside Mia's bed, holding her small hand as she slept. He could hear the faint beeping from another room, the rhythm of a stranger's fading heartbeat. He didn't know her name, but something about that fragile sound pierced through his exhaustion. He thought of Chloe, the wife he couldn't save, and a quiet ache filled his chest. The next morning, as he walked past the nurse's station, he overheard two of them talking softly. That woman in the VIP suite, the billionaire, Harper Kincaid, she won't last the week without a donor. Elias froze mid-step. The name meant nothing to him, but the tone, pity wrapped in resignation, hit him like a spark in the dark. For some reason, he couldn't walk away. He looked through the glass of her floor, saw her motionless under the dim lights, fragile despite her power. And in that moment, something inside him shifted. He didn't know her story, her sins, or her wealth. He only saw a human being left to die alone, the same way his wife had. And before he even realized it, a decision had already been born in his heart. Elias sat in the waiting area, his hands trembling as he filled out the anonymous donor form. The pen felt heavier than any mop handle he'd ever held. Every line he signed was a quiet goodbye to certainty, to safety, to the comfort of knowing Mia would always have him nearby. But as he wrote his name, he could hear Chloe's voice again, soft and steady in his mind. The right thing rarely feels safe. When the nurse asked if he was sure, he simply nodded. He didn't mention he had a daughter. He didn't mention the late-night shifts or the bills piled at home. Some truths were too sacred to weigh against a stranger's life. All he asked was that his identity remain hidden. He didn't need gratitude. He only wanted someone, somewhere, to keep breathing. The doctor smiled sadly, murmuring, "Most people only sign when it's family." Elias met his eyes and whispered, "She is someone's family." Then, as if compelled by instinct, he drew a small daisy beside his signature, Chloe's favorite flower. It wasn't planned. It was his way of saying goodbye to the woman he'd loved and the kindness she had taught him to believe in. 2 days later, the surgery took place before sunrise. The cold light of the operating room blurred into something dreamlike, sterile, distant, holy. As anesthesia pulled him under, Elias felt neither fear nor regret, only peace. Somewhere above him, beyond the bright lights, he imagined Chloe smiling. Maybe, just maybe, she was proud of him for keeping her spirit alive through one final act of love. When Harper Kincaid awoke after the transplant, her body ached, but her heart, for reasons she couldn't name, felt heavier than ever. The doctor told her the surgery was a success, that her donor wished to remain anonymous. She stared at the ceiling, wondering why a stranger would give up part of their life for her. For the first time in years, she whispered a prayer, not for wealth or control, but for the nameless soul who had saved her. Somewhere across the city, Elias lay in a dim hospital room, hooked to quiet monitors, smiling through exhaustion. He didn't need to know her reaction. He didn't thanks or recognition. For him, the act itself was enough. He had given life, and somehow, in doing so, found a reason to keep living himself. Weeks passed, and the rhythm of Harper Kincaid's life returned, but nothing felt the same. The glass walls of her penthouse, once symbols of triumph, now looked like cages of silence. Every morning she touched the small scar along her abdomen and wondered whose pain it once belonged to. Gratitude kept her awake at night. So did guilt, the haunting thought that someone out there might be suffering because she now lived. Her empire resumed its pace, meetings, mergers, and polite applause, but her heart lagged behind. The press called her reborn, claiming the near-death experience had given her fresh vision. They didn't know the truth. She didn't feel reborn. She felt indebted to a stranger who had given her more than money could ever buy, a second chance. And she couldn't stand not knowing his name. She hired private investigators, bribed hospital staff, and pulled strings only billionaires could pull. Every trail led to a locked file, a missing record, or silence. It infuriated her, not because she couldn't find him, but because the mystery forced her to face something she had never confronted before. Power has limits. For all her influence, she couldn't even say thank you to the person who had saved her life. Then, one late night, while inspecting her company's night shift operations, she stepped into an elevator she'd never used before, the maintenance lift. The air smelt faintly of cleaning solution and coffee. As the doors opened, she saw a man polishing the marble lobby floor, humming softly under his breath. On the side of his cleaning cart was a child's drawing, a bright yellow daisy, taped crookedly, full of joy. Harper froze. Her heart pounded. That flower, that simple daisy, matched the one she'd seen sketched on her donor form. She watched him for a long moment, the way he smiled tiredly as he adjusted the mop handle, the gentle way he folded his sleeves. Something about him radiated warmth, the kind that didn't belong in a building built on ambition. When their eyes met, for a split second, time stood still. That night, Harper couldn't sleep. She kept seeing the daisy, that humble mark of hope, and the quiet dignity in the janitor's face. Could it be him? The idea seemed impossible, absurd even. But deep down, beneath the armor of logic and wealth, her heart whispered what her mind refused to believe. Sometimes, the people who save us are the ones we were never taught to see. Harper couldn't stay away. Every night she found a reason to pass by the janitor's floor, pretending to check on building security or the cleaning schedule. She'd catch brief glimpses of Elias Grand, sleeves rolled up, hands steady, humming to a song only he could hear. The quiet grace in him made her chest ache. Something about his calm felt achingly familiar, like safety she'd never known. One night, when their eyes met again, she finally asked softly, "Was it you?" Elias froze. For a heartbeat, the world stopped spinning. He could have lied, he'd rehearsed the words 100 times, but the truth weighed heavier than fear. "Yes," he said, barely above a whisper. "I'm sorry you found out." Harper's breath hitched. "Sorry? You saved my life." But he only smiled, tired and humble. No one should have to face that kind of loneliness alone. That sentence broke something open inside her. Rumors spread fast. The building buzzed with whispers. The billionaire CEO spending nights with the janitor. Beckett Rowe, her ambitious deputy, twisted the story into scandal. He framed it as manipulation, a ploy for money or sympathy, and called an emergency board meeting to strip Harper of her position. The press caught wind of it. Cameras gathered. Her reputation, everything she'd rebuilt, hung by a thread. When the meeting began, Harper walked in not with lawyers or PR advisors, but with Elias by her side. Beckett sneered, "Bringing your janitor to the boardroom, Miss Kincaid?" Harper looked straight into his eyes. "No," she said, "I'm bringing the man who gave me the heart to keep this company alive." The room fell silent. Elias shifted uncomfortably, but Harper nodded for him to speak. Elias took a breath, voice calm but trembling. "I'm not rich. I don't have influence. I clean the floors where people walk without seeing me. But I believe kindness still means something, even when no one's watching." For a moment, the boardroom, a place of power, greed, and ambition, felt holy. No one dared to speak. Even Beckett looked away. When Harper finished her statement, she didn't defend her position or her choices. She simply said, "If helping someone like him is a crime, then I'm guilty." The vote that followed was unanimous. Beckett was dismissed. Harper kept her seat. But more than that, she regained something far greater than authority, faith in the goodness that built her empire in the first place. In the days that followed, the story spread far beyond Kincaid Tower. News outlets called it the miracle of mercy, and people all over the country wrote letters thanking Elias for reminding them that kindness still existed. But for him, fame meant nothing. He returned to work quietly, the same man with the same mop, except now the building seemed to shine a little brighter beneath his hands. Even Harper noticed. For the first time in years, the air in her company felt alive. One morning, she called Elias into her office, not the towering glass suite of before, but a smaller, sunlit room she'd converted into something warmer. On her desk sat a small white daisy in a glass cup. "You gave me a new life," she said softly, "and I don't want it to stop with me." Then she slid a folder across the table. Inside was a plan, the Chloe Grand Foundation, named after his late wife, a fund to help employees facing medical crises. Harper's voice trembled. "Let's make sure no one here ever faces what you did, alone." Elias couldn't speak for a long moment. His rough hands, used to holding tools and cleaning rags, now held a dream he never dared to imagine. He finally whispered, Chloe would have liked that. Harper smiled, tears glistening in her eyes. Then it settled, she said. From today, you'll run it. The words felt unreal. A janitor, once invisible, was now being trusted to lead something born entirely from love. The foundation opened quietly but grew faster than anyone predicted. Employees volunteered, companies donated, and families found hope in moments they thought were lost. Every time a worker received help, Elias saw a bit of Chloe's kindness reflected back, proof that even grief could bloom into something beautiful. Mia would visit sometimes, helping her dad hand out care packages, laughing in the halls once filled with corporate tension. Harper, once a woman defined by ambition, now found herself defined by compassion. She no longer chased profit margins, but stories of people she could lift. And every time she saw Elias speaking with a worker, calm and sincere, she realized how rare his kind of wealth was. The wealth of a heart that gives without counting. Together, they had turned pain into purpose. And as the evening sun poured through the glass walls, Elias stood on the balcony beside Harper, looking out over the city that had once felt too big, too cold. "It's strange," he murmured, "how one act can change everything." Harper nodded, eyes following the skyline. "No," she said softly, "it didn't just change everything, it changed us." In that golden silence, they both knew. Some lives don't just cross, they heal each other. Months passed, and the world moved on. But inside the halls of Kincaid Innovations, something had changed forever. The building that once echoed with ambition now hummed with laughter and quiet gratitude. Where power once ruled, compassion had taken root. The janitor who once walked unseen now had a name engraved on the door of a new office, Elias Grand, director, the Chloe Grand Foundation. Yet he still preferred to take his lunch in the break room with the cleaning crew, reminding them, titles don't matter, hearts do. One afternoon, Harper found him in the garden behind the building, the same garden they had built together for employees to rest. Mia was kneeling in the dirt, planting daisies along the path. Harper crouched beside her and asked, "Why daisies?" The little girl smiled, her voice gentle and sure. "Because Mom said daisies mean hope that doesn't give up." Harper's eyes softened. She looked at Elias, and for the first time, he saw peace in her face, the kind of peace that comes when a soul has finally come home. The foundation kept growing, reaching hospitals, schools, and small towns across the country. It became a movement more than a company, proof that kindness, once sown, never truly stops spreading. Reporters tried to label it as a redemption project, but Harper corrected them every time. It's not redemption, it's gratitude turned into action. And every time she said those words, she thought of the man who gave her both life and perspective. One evening, long after the offices had emptied, Harper stood beside Elias at the rooftop garden, the city glowing beneath them. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked quietly. He shook his head. "No," he said. "I didn't save your life, Harper. I just passed the kindness my wife gave me forward. You're the one who made it grow." The wind carried their words into the night. Simple, real, unpolished. The kind of truth that didn't need to be repeated to be remembered. Harper turned toward him, her voice steady but full of emotion. "You taught me that success means nothing if it doesn't lift someone else." Elias smiled faintly. "Then promise me one thing," he said. "Keep lifting." She nodded, her eyes glistening under the golden skyline. In that moment, two souls, once broken in different ways, stood together whole again. And as the camera fades, the final image lingers. A single daisy swaying in the rooftop breeze, its petals catching the last light of the setting sun. A voice speaks softly in the distance, Harper's voice, carrying the message they built their lives upon. You don't need to be rich to change a life. You just need a heart willing to give, because kindness, once shared, never fades.